March 2026 is turning the Middle East into a pressure point where a single mistake can shift the global balance. The campaign against Iran is continuing, and this is no longer a simple exchange of strikes. It's a fight for control. Control of the air, control of logistics, and control over whether the regime can still hold the system together. Israel is reporting a record combat sortie, more than 200 fighter jets in one operation, and that lands like a message. The stakes are rising, and the window for pauses is closing. In this video, we'll break down why the strikes are hitting not only military targets, but also the power structures behind them. What it means when pressure builds on key ports and rear area bases. How Iran is expanding the zone of retaliatory attacks, and why Europe is becoming a more active part of the equation. The real question is where this trajectory leads: toward containment and a halt, or toward a war of attrition where there will be no safe zones. The campaign against Iran didn't end with a single strike. It's evolving into a systematic air operation, where the two main players, the United States and Israel, are moving in sync, taking down air defenses, squeezing missile infrastructure, and widening the window for follow-on attacks. The logic is straightforward. First, you blind and stun. Then you methodically burn down anything that can deliver a retaliatory blow. Against that backdrop, Israel announced the largest combat sortie in the history of its air force. Around 200 fighter jets struck and dropped hundreds of munitions on roughly 500 targets inside Iran, including air defense systems and missile launchers. The point isn't the impressive number on its own. It's what it signals about scale and intent. Is a classic SEAD-DEAD profile, suppression and destruction of enemy air defenses, where the goal isn't just to smash specific sites, but to break the opponent's ability to defend its skies and coordinate a response. Israeli and American messaging is already going beyond tactical wins. In diplomatic and military commentary, you can hear the claim that the coalition has effectively achieved broad freedom of action in the air over a significant part of Iran. But there's a hard limit here too. Even with air superiority, Iran can still keep portions of its missiles and strike assets down low, in tunnels, hardened shelters, and underground depots. And that's exactly why this campaign isn't a one-off event. It becomes a longer process of grinding down remaining capabilities. In other words, what we're watching isn't an isolated episode. It's the rollout of a model. First, control the air, then sustained pressure on missile potential and command nodes. So Tehran has fewer and fewer options left for a large-scale reply. Israel's next move in this campaign shows the focus isn't only on missiles and air defenses, but on Iran's political and command structure itself. According to Reuters, a strike hit a building linked to the Assembly of Experts, an institution of roughly 88 senior Shiite clerics that, under Iran's constitutional framework, is responsible for selecting a new supreme leader. Even if the objective wasn't to physically eliminate members of the body, the choice of target is the message. The strikes are aimed at the succession mechanism and at the regime's ability to quickly rebuild its power vertical after leadership losses. The Washington Post, citing verified video, reports serious damage to a building in Qom used by this structure. Iranian sources, meanwhile, claim people were evacuated in advance and there were no casualties. Why do this from a military perspective? In a major air campaign, the target's first priority is to survive while keeping command and control intact. Who issues orders? Who authorizes retaliation? Who coordinates the security apparatus? And who the paramilitary networks ultimately answer to? Hitting symbolic and administrative nodes is a way to force hesitation, inject chaos, and trigger competition inside the elite. In effect, Israel is trying to make sure new top leaders can't simply respawn on schedule. The impact is direct. Even a disrupted or delayed session creates a window of vulnerability in the decision-making system. Coherence drops, internal rivalry intensifies, and the risk of unsynchronized actions by security forces rises. In that environment, Iran becomes less predictable, and that can make it more dangerous in its responses because the odds increase of sharp, demonstrative, or poorly controlled strikes. The US-Israeli campaign against Iran isn't limited to precision hits on the capital. It's expanding toward critical infrastructure that keeps military logistics and exports running. The first clear example is Bandar Abbas. Israeli sources claim the port was hit with around 50 targeted strikes and that the site was effectively wiped out. Satellite imagery backs up the impact visually. A heavily damaged base and port area, dense clusters of fires, and large smoke plumes hanging over the coastal infrastructure. From a military standpoint, this reads as a strike on a maritime supply hub and on Iran's ability to rapidly shift resources along the southern axis around the Strait of Hormuz. Next is the Day 4 map compiled by Clement Mollin, a French researcher and OSINT analyst, and what matters most here is the geography. According to the summary, the US and Israel are still pushing to secure control of the airspace and then striking dozens of launch sites, rear area bases, and command centers, primarily around Tehran. Iran is responding in a regional pattern rather than from a single point. Drones and missiles are sent toward targets across the Middle East, some aimed at US facilities. Qatar and the UAE have released interception figures, but along several vectors the numbers remain unclear. The map highlights two new escalation lines. The first is Lebanon. After Hezbollah activity, Israel shifts part of its fire toward the Lebanese front. The second is Iran widening its targeting set toward energy infrastructure and diplomatic sites. Reports mention attacks on Saudi targets, including the Ras Tanura refinery, and an incident involving the US Embassy in Riyadh. One especially worrying detail is a report of friendly fire over Kuwait and the loss of 3 F-15 IDS. If confirmed, it would be a marker of just how crowded and stressed the air picture is. Air defenses overloaded, identification strained, and the risk of mistakes rising fast. The bottom line on Day 4 looks like this. Iran hasn't collapsed. Retaliatory strikes are continuing, and the key question is shifting toward resources. How long Iran can sustain missile and drone launches, and how long Israel and the Gulf states can sustain air defense interceptor stocks. If additional US transport aircraft really are moving munitions into the region, that's a sign both sides are preparing not for an ending, but for the next phase, a war of attrition. By the fourth day of escalation, Tehran's rhetoric clearly added a new layer, the threat of pushing the war beyond the Middle East. According to Euronews, citing a statement from an Iranian foreign ministry representative, Tehran signaled that if European countries join the US-Israeli operation, it would be treated as an act of war and European states could become targets. The point of that line isn't, "We declare war tomorrow." It's to stop the coalition from expanding. For Iran, it's critical that Europe does not get directly involved, whether through aircraft, basing access, missile defense, or logistics. That's why the threat is aimed at two audiences at once. The first is European capitals. Don't go deeper, or the risk becomes your domestic problem. The second is U.S. partners in the region. If you provide infrastructure, you're on the list too. Against this backdrop, observers note that Iran's attacks have already broadened across the region, increasing the chance of pulling in additional players, including Western allies. The 2,000 to 3,000 kilometers rings map functions as a visual argument. Tehran is reminding everyone of the range of parts of its missile arsenal and trying to shift the framing from helping the US to risking our own cities. But there's a downside to this tactic. It often consolidates opponents. The broader the threats, the stronger Europe's incentive becomes to reinforce missile defense, expand basing, and tighten coordination with the United States, rather than step back. But the final signals of the last few days are increasingly coming not from Tehran and not from Tel Aviv, but from European capitals. French President Emmanuel Macron addressed the nation against the backdrop of the war in the Middle East and effectively made the point clear. Paris is ready to increase its presence and defend partners in the region. Macron pointed to France's defense agreements with Qatar, Kuwait, and the UAE, stressing that these countries are under threat and that France has an obligation to show solidarity. Then came the specifics, and they matter more than any phrasing. Macron said France will send a frigate towards Cyprus, and he also ordered the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle and its escort group to move into the Mediterranean. That means Europe is beginning to shift from statements to military presence, even if it's framed as defensive and protective measures, shielding allies, strengthening air defense, controlling sea lanes, and protecting infrastructure and logistics. And this is the key question everyone is watching now. What will Europe's overall response look like? Will it remain a set of separate national moves, or will it evolve into broader coordination with the United States and regional partners? Because the more European forces appear in the Mediterranean and around the Persian Gulf, the higher the risk of new incidents and new points of contact. To stay on top of the next developments and the next wave of information, subscribe to the channel. The latest updates and an updated breakdown of how Europe responds and what Iran does next are coming in the next video.